Lisa Morgan stared at her computer screen in the communication room of the space station New Horizon. The strange signals had been coming in for 3 hours now. She had never seen anything like them before. The patterns were too complex to be natural space noise, but too organized to be random. "Commander Sullivan, you need to see this," Lisa called across the room. Her voice carried a note of worry that made Jake Sullivan look up from his reports immediately. Jake walked over to Lisa's station and looked at the display. Lines of code scrolled across the screen in patterns that seemed almost alive. "What am I looking at, Morgan?" "It's a transmission, sir, but not from any human ship or station. The signal is coming from the Zephyr system, about 40 light years. From here." Lisa pressed a few buttons and the screen changed. "I've been trying to decode it for hours. It's definitely artificial and it's definitely trying to communicate." Jake frowned. The Zephyr system was home to the Zephyrians, a race of crystal-like aliens that humans had met 50 years ago. They were peaceful beings who kept mostly to themselves. Contact between humans and Zephyrians happened maybe once or twice a year, usually just to trade information about safe travel routes. "Have you tried the standard Zephyrian communication protocols?" Jake asked. "That's the first thing. I tried. This is different, much more complex." Lisa pointed to a section of the screen. "Look at this pattern here. It repeats every few minutes, getting stronger each time. If I didn't know better, I'd say it was getting more desperate." Jake studied the patterns for a moment. Something about them made him feel uneasy. "Can you decode any of it?" Lisa nodded and typed commands into her computer. "I've managed to piece together some basic words. The translation software is having trouble, but I'm getting words like help, danger, and death. Commander, I think they're asking for help." "Get Dr. Rodriguez down here immediately," Jake ordered, "and contact Admiral Bell. If the Zephyrians are in trouble, we need to know about it." 20 minutes later, Dr. Elena Rodriguez hurried into the communication room. She was the station's expert on alien life and had studied the Zephyrians for most of her career. Jake quickly explained what Lisa had discovered. Elena looked at the transmission data and her face grew serious. "This is unprecedented. The Zephyrians are incredibly proud. They've never asked anyone for help before, not even when their colony on Zephyr 4 was hit by that asteroid storm 15 years ago." "So this is unusual?" Jake asked. "More than unusual, it's alarming." Elena worked with Lisa to improve the translation. After an hour of work, they had decoded enough of the message to understand the basic content. The transmission was indeed a plea for help. The Zephyrians were facing something they called the Devourers. According to the message, these Devourers had already destroyed 12 Zephyrian worlds. They consumed everything in their path, turning planets into empty rocks, floating in space. 12 worlds, Jake whispered. "How is that possible?" Elena read more of the translated message. "They're describing the Devourers as machines, self-replicating machines that learn and adapt. Every time the Zephyrians fight them, the machines get smarter." Lisa looked up from her screen. "There's more coming in. The signal is getting stronger." The new section of the message contained more details about the Devourers. They were not just destroying Zephyrian worlds randomly. They seemed to be moving in a pattern, working their way toward the Zephyrian homeworld. According to the message, the machines would reach the homeworld in less than 6 months. "They've tried everything," Elena said as she read the translation. "Energy shields, plasma weapons, quantum disruption fields. Nothing works. The machines adapt to every defense." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "What exactly are they asking us to do? Our weapons aren't more advanced than theirs." Elena continued reading, and her expression changed to one of confusion. "This is strange. They're not asking for our weapons or our ships. They're asking for us, for humans specifically." "What do you mean?" "According to this message, they've studied how humans solve problems. They say that every other species in the galaxy thinks in predictable patterns, but humans are different. Humans do things that don't make sense to other species, but somehow work anyway." Lisa looked confused. "They want our help because we're unpredictable?" "It seems that way," Elena replied. "They mentioned several examples of human actions that other species considered impossible or insane. But that succeeded anyway. Jake thought about this for a moment. It was true that humans had a reputation among other alien species for being chaotic and unpredictable. Most species saw this as a weakness, something that made humans unreliable partners. "Commander," Lisa said, "I'm getting a priority communication from Earth. Admiral Bell wants to speak with you immediately." Jake took the call in his private office. Admiral Patricia Bell appeared on his screen looking serious. "Sullivan, we've received copies of the Zephyrian transmission. This is bigger than your station can handle. I'm sending Captain Ryan Torres with the heavy cruiser Defiant to your location. You'll work together to assess this situation." "What are our orders, Admiral?" "Find out everything you can about these devourers. If they're as dangerous as the Zephyrians claim, they could be a threat to everyone, including us." Bell paused. "The Zephyrians have been good neighbors for 50 years. We owe them help if we can provide it." "Understood, Admiral. Torres will arrive in 48 hours. Be ready to brief him completely." The connection ended. Jake returned to the communication room where Elena and Lisa were still working on the translation. "How much more of the message have you decoded?" "Most of it," Elena replied. "Commander, this is terrifying. The Zephyrians describe the Devourers as unlike anything they've ever encountered. These machines don't just destroy worlds, they learn from every battle. They've become so advanced that they can predict and counter any logical military strategy. And they think humans can help because we're not logical?" "Exactly. They believe that human unpredictability is the only thing that might confuse these machines enough to give us an advantage." Lisa looked up from her screen. "There's one more thing. The Zephyrians have included detailed star charts showing which systems the Devourers have already consumed. If they continue on their current path, they'll reach human space in about 10 years. Jake felt his blood run cold. This wasn't just about helping the Zephyrians anymore. If these Devourers continued to grow and spread, they would eventually threaten Earth itself. "Keep working on that translation," Jake ordered. "I want every detail we can get before Captain Torres arrives. And start preparing all our data on human military tactics and problem-solving methods. If the Zephyrians are right about what makes us different, we're going to need to understand it ourselves." As Jake looked out the window of the space station, at the stars beyond, he wondered what kind of enemy could destroy 12 worlds and still be growing stronger. More importantly, he wondered if human unpredictability would really be enough to stop something that advanced. The next 2 days would determine whether humanity would step forward to help their alien neighbors, or whether they would watch as an unstoppable force consumed the galaxy one world at a time. Captain Ryan Torres stood on the bridge of the heavy cruiser Defiant as it dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Zephyrian territory. What he saw through the main viewing screen made his stomach turn. Where the planet Zephyr 7 should have been, there was only empty space and floating debris. "Amy, run a full scan of the system," Ryan ordered his science officer. Amy Carter worked at her console, her fingers flying over the controls. "Captain, I'm detecting massive amounts of metal debris. The composition matches Zephyrian city structures, but everything has been broken down to basic elements. How long ago did this happen?" "Based on the debris patterns, I'd say less than a week." "Sir, there's something else. I'm reading energy signatures consistent with active machinery about 2 light hours away from our position." Ryan felt his jaw tighten. "The Devourers? It has to be. The energy patterns don't match any known Zephyrian or human technology. Set course for those energy signatures, but keep us at maximum sensor range. I want to see these things before they see us." The Defiant moved slowly through the dead system. As they got closer to the energy signatures, Amy's readings became more detailed and more disturbing. "Captain, I'm counting at least 50,000 individual mechanical units. They're working in perfect coordination, stripping materials from asteroids and small moons. Each piece of material is being processed and turned into more machines." Ryan watched the tactical display as thousands of red dots moved across the screen in precise patterns. "How fast are they reproducing?" "At current rates, their numbers will double in approximately 6 days. Chief Engineer Danny Walsh joined them on the bridge, looking at the sensor data with growing alarm. "Captain, I've been studying the Zephyrian technical reports. These machines are using technology that's at least 100 years ahead of anything we have. In what way? Their power sources, their manufacturing capabilities, their coordination systems. Each individual unit is more advanced than our best computers, and they're all working together like parts of a single organism. Lieutenant Maya Patel, the ship's tactical officer, looked up from her station. Sir, I'm detecting another group of energy signatures approaching from the outer system. It's a Zephyrian fleet, 12 ships. Open a communication channel. The main screen flickered and showed a Zephyrian commander. The crystal-like being's normally bright inner light was dim, a sign of extreme stress among their species. Human vessel, I am Commander Veltar of the Zephyrian Defense Force. You should not be here. This system is lost. Commander Veltar, I'm Captain Torres. We received your people's request for help. We're here to learn about these devourers. There is nothing to learn except death. Watch. Veltar's fleet moved toward the devourer swarm. The Zephyrian ships were beautiful, sleek vessels that moved like living things through space. Their weapons were powerful energy beams that could cut through solid rock. Ryan watched as the Zephyrians engaged the devourers. The alien ships fought with practiced precision, their energy weapons targeting the largest devourer units. For a few minutes, it looked like they were winning. Several devourer machines exploded in brilliant flashes. Then everything changed. Amy, are you seeing this? Ryan asked. Yes, sir. The devourers are adapting in real time. They're changing their hull composition to resist the Zephyrian weapons. What had been effective weapons moments before now barely scratched the devourer units. Worse, the machines were learning the Zephyrian attack patterns. They began moving in ways that anticipated where the Zephyrian ships would fire next. They're predicting the Zephyrian tactics, Maya observed. Every move the Zephyrians make, the devourers counter it perfectly. The battle turned into a massacre. The Zephyrian ships, following their military doctrine, tried standard defensive maneuvers. The devourers anticipated every move. One by one, the beautiful crystal ships were torn apart by mechanical claws and energy beams. Commander Veltar, retreat, Ryan called over the communication channel. We cannot. If we do not stop them here, they will reach the next system in days. But the Zephyrians had no choice. Of the 12 ships that had attacked, only 3 limped away from the battle. The devourers had lost perhaps a dozen units, but they had already begun rebuilding using materials from the destroyed Zephyrian ships. Captain, Amy said quietly, I've been monitoring the devourer communications during the battle. They're using a shared intelligence network. Every piece of information learned by one unit is instantly shared with all the others. That's how they adapt so quickly. Yes, sir, but there's more. The network exists partially in normal space and partially in subspace dimensions. That's why they're so hard to disrupt with conventional weapons. Danny Walsh looked at the sensor. Readings. This is worse than we thought. These things aren't just advanced machines. They're a collective intelligence that learns from every encounter. Ryan studied the tactical display. The devourers had already returned to their work of processing asteroid materials. They moved with perfect efficiency, every action calculated for maximum resource extraction. Maya, how would you attack something like this? Maya considered the question. Standard doctrine would be to target their command structure, disrupt their communications, or attack their resource production. But sir, watching that battle, I don't think any of those approaches would work. Why not? Because they don't have a traditional command structure. Every unit is part of the same intelligence, and they adapt so quickly that any successful tactic becomes useless after the first few minutes. Amy turned from her console. Captain, I've been analyzing their behavior patterns. The devourers respond to threats in mathematically optimal ways. They calculate the most efficient response to any attack and implement it instantly. What about their weaknesses? That's just it, sir. I can't find any consistent weaknesses. They seem to anticipate every logical tactical approach. Ryan thought about what they had observed. Danny, you said they learn from every encounter? That's right. Their intelligence network stores every piece of tactical data they encounter. They use it to predict future threats. So the more conventional battles, They fight. The better they get at fighting conventional battles. Exactly. Ryan made a decision. All right, we're returning to human space. We've seen enough. Sir? Maya asked. Think about it. The Zephyrians fight logically. They follow military doctrine, use proven tactics, and make decisions based on logical analysis. The Devourers can predict and counter that kind of thinking because it follows patterns. Amy looked interested. What are you suggesting, Captain? I'm suggesting that maybe the Zephyrians were right to ask for human help. Every species we've met follows logical patterns when they fight. But humans... Ryan paused. Humans do things that don't make sense. We take risks that no logical mind would take. We make decisions based on intuition and emotion as much as facts. Danny nodded slowly. And if these machines are designed to counter logical thinking, then maybe illogical thinking is exactly what we need. As the Defiant jumped back into hyperspace, carrying its crew away from the horror they had witnessed, Ryan began to wonder if humanity's reputation for unpredictable behavior might actually be their greatest strength against an enemy that could counter every logical strategy. The trip back to human space would give them time to think about how to fight an enemy that learned from every battle and adapted to every tactic. Somehow, they had to find a way to be more unpredictable than the most advanced intelligence the galaxy had ever seen. The fate of two species might depend on humanity's ability to be more chaotic than ever before. Director Helen Murphy sat at the head of the long table in the Global Defense Council meeting room on Earth. Around her were the most important military leaders and scientists from every human colony. The holographic display in the center of the table showed Captain Torres's battle recordings from the Zephyrian system. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a problem, Helen said as the recording ended. These Devourers represent a threat unlike anything we've ever faced. If they continue expanding at their current rate, they'll reach human space within 10 years. General Kevin Brooks leaned forward in his chair. Director Murphy, I recommend we mobilize the entire fleet immediately. We have over 300 warships and the most advanced weapons in human space. We can stop these machines. Dr. Nathan Price, the Council's chief computer analyst, shook his head. General, I've run combat simulations based on Captain Torres's data. Our conventional weapons would be no more effective than the Zephyrian energy beams. The Devourers would adapt to our tactics within hours. Then we hit them harder and faster, Brooks replied. Overwhelming force before they can adapt. Sir, with respect, that won't work? Price continued. The Devourer's learning network means that any tactic we use successfully once becomes useless forever. Even if we destroy half their forces in a surprise attack, the survivors would be immune to the same strategy. Helen looked around the table at the worried faces. Does anyone have alternative suggestions? Dr. Claire Watson, a small woman with gray hair, raised her hand. She was known throughout the scientific community as an expert in chaos theory and complex systems. Director Murphy, I believe we're approaching this problem incorrectly. How so, Dr. Watson? We're trying to fight these machines using the same logical thinking that every other species uses. But logic is exactly what makes the Devourers so effective. They can predict logical responses. Admiral Gary Foster, the head of the Space Fleet, looked skeptical. Are you suggesting we fight illogically? That's not how military campaigns work, Doctor. Actually, Admiral, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. Consider human military history. Our greatest victories often came from strategies that seemed impossible or insane to our enemies. Dr. Monica Lewis, a cybernetics expert, leaned forward with interest. Dr. Watson, are you talking about weaponizing human unpredictability? Precisely. The Zephyrians asked for our help because they recognize something that we often see as a weakness. Humans don't always follow logical patterns. We make decisions based on emotion, intuition, and creative thinking that other species consider irrational. Helen felt a spark of interest. Go on. What if we created a system that could replicate human decision-making processes, including our tendency toward seemingly irrational choices? Dr. Price looked confused. You want to build machines that think like humans? How would that help? Against the Devourers? Because the Devourers are designed to counter logical, predictable behavior. If we create systems that behave unpredictably like humans do, the Devourer intelligence network won't be able to predict their actions. Captain Alex Miller, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. Dr. Watson, I've spent 20 years in Special Forces operations. Some of our most successful missions succeeded because we did things that made no tactical sense to the enemy. Are you suggesting we program machines to think like soldiers who ignore the rulebook? Exactly, Captain Miller. We create autonomous units programmed with human psychological patterns. They would have broad objectives but no specific tactical instructions. Instead, they would make decisions the way humans do, including illogical choices based on incomplete information. General Brooks frowned. This sounds extremely dangerous. Unpredictable weapons could be as dangerous to us as to the enemy. General, Helen said, these Devourers have destroyed 12 worlds and show no signs of slowing down. Perhaps dangerous is exactly what we need. Dr. Lewis was already working on her tablet, running calculations. Dr. Watson, this concept could work, but the programming would be incredibly complex. We'd need to create artificial intelligence systems that can replicate human emotional responses, intuitive leaps, and creative problem solving. How long would something like that take to develop? Helen asked. With full resources and unlimited funding, perhaps 6 months to create a prototype. Mass production would take another 6 months. Admiral Foster looked worried. Director, you're talking about creating thousands of unpredictable weapons and releasing them in space. What if they turn on us? Captain Miller answered before Helen could respond. Admiral, I've studied the Devourer tactical data. Their prediction algorithms are designed to counter rational military thinking. If Dr. Watson is right, truly unpredictable behavior might be the only thing that can confuse them enough to create an advantage. Dr. Watson nodded. The key is that these units wouldn't just be random. They would be programmed with different aspects of human psychology. Some would be aggressive risk-takers, others would be cautious planners, some would be creative problem solvers. The variety would make their collective behavior impossible to predict. Helen looked around the table. Dr. Price, could you run simulations on this concept? Already working on it, Director. Price's fingers flew over his keyboard. After several minutes, he looked up with surprise. The preliminary results are remarkable. Computer models of the Devourer learning network show significant confusion when faced with truly random decision patterns. What kind of confusion? Their adaptation algorithms become overloaded trying to find patterns in behavior that has no consistent pattern. It's like trying to solve a math problem that changes its rules randomly. Dr. Lewis looked up from her tablet. I'm seeing similar results in my analysis. The Devourer network is designed to learn from every encounter, but if every encounter is fundamentally different and seemingly irrational, the learning process breaks down. General Brooks still looked skeptical. This all sounds very theoretical. How do we know it would work in actual combat? Captain Miller smiled. General, every time humans have faced a superior enemy, we've won by doing things that didn't make sense to them. The British Navy never expected American colonists to fight guerrilla campaigns. The German army never expected Russian soldiers to fight to the death for every building in Stalingrad. Those were human conflicts, Brooks replied. But the principle is the same. We succeed when we're unpredictable. Helen made her decision. Dr. Watson, Dr. Lewis, I'm authorizing Project Wildcard. You have unlimited resources to develop these unpredictable combat units. Captain Miller, you'll work with them to design deployment strategies. What about the risks? Admiral Foster asked. The risk of doing nothing is that the Devourers eventually reach Earth. The risk of Project Wildcard is that we create weapons we can't completely control. I'd rather face the second risk than guarantee the first outcome. Dr. Watson looked excited for the first time since the meeting began. Director, we'll need to study human psychological patterns in detail. Combat veterans, creative artists, risk-takers, problem solvers. We need to understand what makes human thinking unpredictable. You'll have access to volunteer subjects from every branch of the military and civilian sectors. Captain Miller was already thinking about tactical applications. Dr. Watson, these wildcard units would need to operate independently in enemy territory. They'd have to make decisions without any communication with human commanders. That's exactly the point, Captain. They'd be truly autonomous, making choices based on programmed human instincts rather than logical algorithms. Helen stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our plan. In 1 year, we're going to find out if human unpredictability can defeat the most advanced intelligence in the galaxy. As the council members filed out of the room, Helen looked at the holographic display still showing the destroyed Zephyrian world. Soon, humanity would discover if their greatest weakness could become their most powerful weapon. Dr. Carl Thompson walked through the massive production facility on Titan, Saturn's largest moon. Around him, thousands of robotic arms worked day and night building the wildcard units. Each unit was the size of a small spacecraft, packed with advanced artificial intelligence systems and enough weapons to fight a small war. "How many are ready for deployment?" asked Field Commander Lisa Parker as she joined Thompson on the observation deck. "We've completed 8,000 units so far. Each one has a different personality profile based on human psychological patterns we've studied." Thompson pointed to a section of the factory floor. "Those units over there are programmed with aggressive risk-taking behavior. The ones on the left are designed to be creative problem solvers." Lisa watched as the mechanical arms installed the final components in a row of wildcard units. "Dr. Thompson, I have to ask, are you sure these things won't turn on us?" "Commander Parker, they're programmed to see humans and Zephyrians as allies and devourers as enemies. But beyond that, their behavior is designed to be unpredictable even to us. That's what worries me." Thompson smiled. "That's exactly what should make the devourers worry too." Lisa had been chosen to lead the deployment mission because of her experience with covert operations. Her team included some of the best special forces soldiers in human space. Tony Garcia, her demolitions expert, had volunteered specifically because he liked the idea of unpredictable explosives. Kate Sullivan, her infiltration specialist, was excited to work with machines that could think outside normal patterns. "Commander Parker," came a voice over the intercom, "your ship is ready for loading." Lisa looked at the completed wildcard units. Each one looked different from the others, reflecting their different personality programming. Some were built for speed and mobility, others for heavy assault, and still others for stealth and infiltration. "All right, people," Lisa called to her team. "Let's load these babies up and see if human craziness can beat alien logic." The stealth ship Ghostwalker was specially designed for covert operations behind enemy lines. Its advanced cloaking systems could hide it from most sensors, and its cargo bay had been modified to carry and deploy the wildcard units quickly. The journey to Devourer-controlled space took 3 weeks. During the trip, Lisa and her team studied the intelligence reports from the Zephyrian systems. The Devourers had consumed 2 more worlds while the wildcard units were being built. Their numbers now exceeded 2 million individual machines. "Tony, what's your assessment of the target systems?" Lisa asked as they reviewed the mission plans. "Commander, based on the sensor data, the Devourers have established processing centers on 3 different worlds. They're strip mining entire planets to build more of themselves." Kate looked at the tactical displays. "The good news is that they're focused on resource extraction. They don't seem to expect any kind of counterattack." "Why would they?" Lisa replied. "They've beaten every conventional force that's challenged them." The Ghostwalker arrived at the edge of the first target system without being detected. Lisa watched through the main view screen as thousands of Devourer units worked with mechanical precision to dismantle what had once been a beautiful Zephyrian colony world. "Beginning deployment of the first wave," Lisa announced. The cargo bay doors opened silently in space and 50 wildcard units drifted out like seeds on a cosmic wind. Each unit had its own propulsion system and would make its way to the target. Independently, Lisa watched the tactical display as the units spread out across the system. "Roger, are you monitoring their communications?" Communications specialist Roger Kim nodded. "Yes, Commander, the interesting thing is, they're not communicating with each other at all. Each unit is operating completely independently. That's the plan. If they don't coordinate with each other, The Devourers can't predict their combined actions. The first wildcard unit reached the planet's surface 12 hours later. Lisa and her team watched the sensor readings as it immediately did something that surprised everyone, including its human creators. Instead of attacking the obvious Devourer facilities, the unit ignored them completely and began digging random holes in the planet's surface. "What is it doing?" Tony asked. Kate checked the unit's programming profile. This one was programmed with obsessive-compulsive tendencies and a tendency to focus on seemingly unimportant details. So it's ignoring the main target to dig holes? Apparently. Roger suddenly looked up from his console. "Commander, I'm detecting confusion in the Devourer communication networks. They're trying to analyze the wildcard unit's behavior, but they can't find any logical pattern." Lisa smiled. "That's exactly what we hoped would happen." Over the next few hours, more wildcard units reached their targets. Each one behaved differently. One unit launched a frontal assault on a major Devourer facility, attacking with such reckless abandon that it actually succeeded despite being outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Another unit spent hours carefully studying the Devourers before launching a complex deception campaign that accomplished nothing obvious, but somehow disrupted their coordination. The most surprising success came from a unit programmed with paranoid behavior patterns. It became convinced that the Devourers were planning to ambush it, so it began attacking targets that seemed completely random. Somehow, every random target it chose turned out to be a critical weak point in the Devourer network. "Dr. Phillips is monitoring this from Earth," Roger reported. "She says the Devourer adaptation algorithms are becoming overloaded, trying to process all the different behavior patterns." Lisa watched as a unit programmed with artistic creativity began rearranging pieces of Devourer machinery into abstract sculptures. The sculptures served no apparent purpose, but the Devourers spent enormous amounts of processing power trying to understand what strategic advantage the sculptures might provide. "Tony, deploy the second wave in the next system." "Roger that, Commander." The second deployment went even better than the first. The wildcard units had been programmed to learn and develop, and they were already evolving beyond their original programming. Some units began working together in ways their human creators hadn't anticipated, while others became even more unpredictable. One unit decided that the best way to fight the Devourers was to paint itself bright colors and dance around their facilities while playing loud music. The Devourers spent days trying to figure out what military advantage this behavior provided. Another unit became convinced that the Devourers were actually trying to communicate through their construction patterns. It began building elaborate responses using scrap metal, creating a bizarre conversation that existed only in the unit's artificial mind but completely confused the Devourer intelligence network. "Commander," Kate observed, "the Devourers are starting to behave erratically themselves. Their normally perfect coordination is breaking down." Lisa looked at the sensor readings. It was true. The Devourer units were beginning to respond to threats that didn't exist and ignore actual dangers. Their learning network, designed to make them more effective against logical opponents, was becoming a liability against opponents who followed no logic at all. "Roger, what's the status on Devourer adaptation?" "Commander, according to the data from Earth, the Devourer central intelligence is showing signs of systematic breakdown. They're trying to process too many contradictory behavior patterns simultaneously." The third deployment was launched into a system where the Devourers had established their largest processing facility. By now, the wildcard units had evolved even further beyond their original programming. Some had developed genuine personalities, while others had become so unpredictable that even their own tactical computers couldn't predict what they would do next. The results exceeded all expectations. Within days of the third deployment, Devourer forces in all three systems began withdrawing. For the first time in their recorded history, the machines were retreating from a battle they hadn't lost through superior firepower. "Commander Parker," came a transmission from Earth. "You are authorized to return home. Mission accomplished." Lisa looked at the tactical display showing the confused and retreating Devourer forces. "Roger that, Earth. Returning home with the good news that human craziness beats alien logic every time." As the Ghostwalker began its journey back to human space, Lisa wondered what the wildcard units would do next. They were still out there, Still evolving, still being unpredictable. For the first time since the crisis began, she felt hopeful about the outcome. 6 months after the first wildcard deployment, Admiral Rachel Stone stood on the bridge of the battleship New Freedom as it approached the final Devourer stronghold. The massive space station had been built by consuming an entire moon, and it housed the central intelligence that controlled all Devourer operations. "Admiral," reported her tactical officer, "the Zephyrian fleet is in position on our starboard side. They're ready to begin the assault." Rachel looked at the combined fleet displayed on her screens. 50 human ships and 30 Zephyrian vessels surrounded the Devourer stronghold. But the real weapons in this battle were not the ships themselves. "Commander Anderson, what's the status of our wildcard units?" Commander Pete Anderson, who had been working with the evolved wildcard units for months, checked his readings. "Admiral, we have over 1,000 units positioned throughout the system, but honestly, I have no idea what they're planning to do." "That's exactly what we want to hear." The wildcard units had been operating independently for months now, and they had changed in ways their creators never expected. Some had developed unique personalities that were almost human-like. Others had become so unpredictable that they seemed to operate on pure instinct rather than any kind of programming. Dr. Janet Brown, who had been studying the units from the science vessel Endeavour, joined the conversation over the communication channel. "Admiral Stone, the wildcard units have been analyzing the Devourer Central Intelligence for weeks. They've identified weaknesses that our conventional analysis missed completely." "What kind of weaknesses?" "The Devourer network is designed to process and learn from logical behavior patterns. But after months of trying to understand wildcard behavior, their central processor has developed what we can only describe as artificial neurosis." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "The machines are having a nervous breakdown?" "In simple terms, yes. They've been exposed to so much contradictory and impossible behavior that their learning algorithms are starting to work against them." The battle began when the Zephyrian ships opened fire with their energy weapons. But this time, they weren't following standard military tactics. Working with human advisors, they had learned to incorporate random and illogical elements into their strategies. One Zephyrian ship suddenly stopped in the middle of the battle and began broadcasting poetry in ancient Zephyrian languages. Another ship started flying in complex spiral patterns that served no tactical purpose but looked beautiful against the stars. The Devourer response was immediate and telling. Instead of countering the attacks efficiently, they seemed confused by the mixture of effective military action and completely pointless activities. "The Devourers don't know which actions to take seriously," observed Commander Anderson. "They're wasting processing power trying to find military significance in poetry and spiral flight patterns." The human ships joined the attack using tactics that would have horrified military historians. Some ships charged directly at the enemy with no defensive planning. Others hung back and did nothing for long periods before launching sudden, overwhelming assaults. But the real chaos began when the wildcard units went into action. A group of 50 units approached the Devourer station and began working together to build what appeared to be a giant sculpture out of space debris. The Devourers immediately assumed this was some kind of weapon and focused enormous resources on stopping the construction. Meanwhile, other wildcard units used the distraction to penetrate the station's defenses. But instead of heading for obvious targets like power systems or command centers, they seemed to wander randomly through the corridors. "Admiral," Dr. Brown reported, "the wildcard units inside the station are doing something remarkable. They're not trying to destroy specific systems. Instead, they're making tiny, random changes to the Devourer network." "What kind of changes?" "Moving a cable here, adjusting a setting there, disconnecting components that don't seem important. Individually, none of these actions matter. But together, they're creating cascading failures throughout the entire system." Rachel watched as the Devourer station began showing signs of malfunction. Lights flickered randomly, defensive weapons fired at empty space, and construction systems began building machines that served no purpose. Commander Anderson was monitoring the wildcard communications. "Admiral, I'm picking up chatter from the units inside the station. One of them thinks it's redecorating the place to make it more comfortable. Another one is convinced that the Devourers are trying to communicate through their computer systems and is responding by rearranging data files. Are they actually accomplishing anything? That's the strange part. Their random actions are somehow targeting the exact weak points in the Devourer network. It's like they're finding solutions through pure intuition. The breakthrough came when a wildcard unit programmed with extreme curiosity discovered the central processing core of the Devourer intelligence. Instead of trying to destroy it, the unit began asking it questions. Not strategic questions or demands for surrender, but simple, illogical questions like, why do you make everything the same? And, don't you ever get bored? And, what's your favorite color? The Devourer Central Intelligence, designed to process tactical information and learn from combat data, had no way to handle these questions. It began trying to analyze the strategic significance of curiosity and favorite colors. Dr. Brown, what's happening to the Central Intelligence? Admiral, it's experiencing a complete system breakdown. The wildcard unit's questions are forcing it to process concepts that don't fit into its logical framework. It's like asking a calculator to explain the meaning of love. Within hours, the breakdown spread throughout the entire Devourer network. Units that had operated with perfect coordination for years began acting independently and irrationally. Some started building useless structures, others began dismantling their own facilities, and a few simply stopped working entirely. The final moment came when the Central Intelligence tried to send a message to the human fleet. The message was a single word, repeated over and over. Confused. 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 Then the massive station went dark. Rachel looked at her crew in amazement. Did we just win a war by confusing the enemy to death? Commander Anderson nodded. It appears so, Admiral. The Devourer network has suffered a complete breakdown. Without central coordination, the individual units are just machines following basic programming. Dr. Brown's excited voice came over the communication system. Admiral, this is incredible. The wildcard units have essentially taught the Devourer intelligence to think like humans, but since it was designed for pure logic, human-style thinking has caused it to crash. The cleanup operation took several weeks. The remaining Devourer units, without their central intelligence, were easily handled by conventional forces. Some units simply shut down on their own, while others began mindlessly following whatever orders they were given. The Zephyrians were amazed by the outcome. Commander Veltar, who had survived the earlier battles, met with Admiral Stone to express his people's gratitude. Admiral Stone, in 50 years of contact with humans, we never understood why your species was so successful despite your apparent chaos. Now we see that your chaos is not a weakness, but a strength that can defeat any logical enemy. Rachel smiled. Commander, we learned something too. We discovered that our greatest weapon isn't our technology or our firepower. It's our ability to think in ways that don't make sense to anyone else, including ourselves sometimes. As the human and Zephyrian fleets prepared to return home, the wildcard units continued their independent operations throughout the former Devourer territory. They had evolved beyond their original programming and seemed determined to continue exploring the galaxy in their own unpredictable ways. Captain Torres, watching from the bridge of the Defiant, sent a final message to Earth. Mission accomplished. We didn't defeat the Devourers by being better machines than they were. We won by being more human than they could comprehend. The galaxy was safe. Not because humanity had built better weapons, but because they had weaponized the very thing that made them unique. Their beautiful, chaotic, unpredictable humanity.